Welcome everybody to today's pivotal webcast, Data Challenges in Clinical Research. Glad you're able to join us. Before we get started, I wanted to introduce our speaker today. Chris Roach is CEO of Aridhia. He joined the company in 2014 to provide strategic commercial leadership as Aridhia embraced new third-generation technologies to support their new cloud-based business model and collaborative data science platform. Chris combines a background in computing, specializing in artificial intelligence and business transformation. He spent 14 years at EMC, where he held a number of senior director positions, including serving as country manager for EMC in Ireland, regional director for Greenplum, EMC's big data business, and as EMEA CTO. He holds a first-class degree in computing and information technology. He's a member of the British Computer Society and is qualified as a chartered engineer and chartered information technology practitioner. Thanks for joining us today, Chris.
Thanks, Jeff.
So quickly, wanted to run through the agenda. First, I'll set a little bit of context for our conversation, talking a little bit about the clinical research field and how data plays a role. Then Chris will go into his presentation talking about some of the market challenges associated with clinical research and data, as well as Aridhia's business model. He'll talk about data in clinical research use cases, as well as Aridhia's own business transformation journey, and finally, dive into the data technology and roadmap associated with Aridhia's platform. Finally, we'll have time for Q&A towards the end of the session. As a reminder, if you have questions, please enter them in the Q&A dialog box on your screen, and we will ask those questions potentially throughout the webinar, but also towards the end, we'll have a dedicated Q&A session. So to set a little bit of the context, I wanted to talk about the clinical research field and how data is impacting it. The increasing sophistication in modern medicine, a seemingly endless supply of data, and the ability to perform large-scale computation is transforming this market of clinical research. It's creating enormous opportunity to find new treatments and even cures for some of humanity's most intractable diseases and conditions. We at Pivotal Software see this every day with our customers in the healthcare and clinical research fields. However, there are challenges that comes with this opportunity. Actually utilizing data to generate new treatments and therapies comes with its own challenges and proves challenging for many clinical research organizations as the siloed-based information systems built up over the last 30 years are simply unable to scale to support today's data volumes and increasingly complex use cases. Many organizations also lack the analytics infrastructure and data science tooling to support truly data-driven research. So today, as we speak with Chris, the CEO of Aridhia, a company whose mission is to help clinical research and clinical researchers in supporting the management of chronic disease, precision medicine, and biomedical research through the use of biomedical informatics and analytics. Aridhia's clinical research analytics platform, called Analytics Agility, and powered by Pivotal Greenplum, the leading MPP analytical database, enables collaborative research teams to quickly collate and analyze huge volumes of data associated with real-world use cases, drug trials, and patient outcomes to develop new data-driven approach to healthcare. Chris is going to share his insights and lessons learned from Aridhia's work with some of the leading clinical research organizations in the world. So Chris, as we get started, would love you if you could tell us a little bit more about Aridhia, your business model, and how it fits into the larger clinical research market.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. And as you introduced us, well, firstly, good afternoon to everybody if you're in Scotland or England, and good morning and good evening to wherever else you are in the globe. Thank you for joining us and hearing about our story here at Aridhia. And as Jeff said, our business model, we're a cloud-based analytics platform. So we're a PaaS SaaS model. We sort of border on both of those two. And we specifically focus on biomedical research, precision medicine, and healthcare communities. And when we talk a platform, both our technology choices are platform technology choices, our commercial go-to-market is a platform approach. So moving from the siloed vertical approach for many years into delivering a platform specifically for those communities. So it's probably worthwhile talking a little bit about our core communities and our core market. But if I turn first to collaborative research, and the picture on the slide there is probably fairly generic to most people. It's a standard process of bringing your data in, looking at it, analyzing it, looking at the quality, and getting some output out. But in collaborative research takes 17 years to go through that process, to go from I've got an idea right the way through to something ending up in clinical practice is on average 17 years. And some of the reasons are there's a great variety of data types going through that process. They can be clinical one, it can be sensor data, questionnaires, imaging, many types of data. We have to even bring data into that model, we have a very interesting and involving consent and information governance model, and they're only getting stronger and tougher and more regulated as we go forward. The amount of collaboration you need through a research process is phenomenal. Yeah, one company, one university really doesn't have the breadth of skills to answer some of the questions, and so bringing people together and bringing their data together becomes really important. And something very specific to the research process is reproducibility. How do we, at a point, if you're thinking of commercializing something, at a point in research you have to be able to bundle all your research together. That includes the code, it includes the data, and be able to give it to another researcher to be able to reproduce. And amongst all that, there's an incredible variation of ontologies and languages that use across this process. So, and then the collaborative research process gets a little bit more complex when you start bringing in precision medicine. So you're bringing in a new set of data into that. You're bringing in sequencing, genomic data. You'd have heard different words for this. And there's been a lot of focus lately and in recent months and years on having enough capacity just to sequence people, just to get the data. And where we focus and there's an emerging need is, right, so we've sequenced all these people. How do we then combine that with the healthcare data? How do we then industrialize this going forward and bring the clinical people in and bring federated analysis in? And I'll talk about some of those. The other people we look at in our other market is more operational healthcare people, and they really come from a different end of the spectrum. They're faced with lots of operational challenges, especially around cost, and they're looking to do things like, how do I bring a multidisciplinary team together around a disease type and have all their data together in one place? How do I do risk prediction and move beyond just standard reporting? And how do I look at the health of our region across a population, not just one segment of that population? And all those mean about crossing borders, crossing boundaries, about bringing things together. So you could be a health organisation in, say, South London, but you have 3 or 4 boroughs, metropolitan boroughs, that you bring data. And they could have built their systems up over different technologies and different ways of looking at their data. And I suppose the main use cases we are seeing at the moment in our marketplace are collaborative research projects. These are big R&D projects. Anybody in Europe now will understand and hear about projects called Horizon 2020 and Innovate UK. These are big collaborative research projects funded from governments, funded from the EU, that wants to bring countries together, and you usually need to have 3 or more countries involved in these projects with a view to commercializing it. The other lot of take-up we're seeing is in what we call pre-competitive consortia, which is bringing in the industrial, the pharmaceuticals, the life science companies. How do we bring them together with researchers, with the clinical community, and look at building solutions, diagnostics forward? The other lot of people we're seeing at the moment is actual institutions and ecosystems. So a whole research institution saying we need to get a handle on our research. We need to actually compete on our research, not on our infrastructure, and we need to offer services up that actually make that possible. And one of the things all those sort of 3 structures are building at the moment is they're very much looking at the preventative world. How am I building diagnostics? Predicting things that will happen, or what will happen if I give this treatment to a set of patients. And if you turn to, well, what are the challenges I most see, our clients most see in those life cycles, there's probably 5 key challenges or ones that keep coming up time and time again. First one being industrialization. How do we complete the cycle? It's okay building something that we prove that it works, but actually we need to get it all the way through to the patient. And that means, how do I do this at enough scale to be doing precision medicine, to do this at a population level, not just prove that something works? Again, and the backdrop to that is, as you bring your data in, we've constantly seen there's a challenge around governance. A big subject we're working on at the moment is adaptive consent. How do you actually consent patients and bring them into this process as well, so that they are feeling fully informed and letting their data be used for what they want it to be? And how do we build that into our technologies? Very, very specific probably to the research community is this idea I talked about earlier of reproducibility. If you want to take your research to market and commercialize it, you have to be able to bundle your code up. And if you've been, and your algorithms and your data, and if you've been emailing this around a collaborative research project for 5 or 6 years, that's going to be difficult to do. So, this idea of how do I make in this more multi-country, multi-bordered, multi-collaboration actually still adhere to reproducibility. The fourth thing we see a lot is I need to be able to rapid prototype. I need to run more models against the data that I have. I just can't wait to build one model and hope that will be the model. So how do I bring rapid prototyping, the ability to look at many things quickly? And then finally, this is where the industry side, when we have life science companies come to work with us and pharmaceutical companies, they always want, I want this delivered back to me as a service. I want a proper SLA back service. And that I know that if I'm going to bring my data to this platform or this service, that we know what we're going to get. It's stable, we know what's going to happen, and we can build our business back off the back of this service. So they would be sort of the number of challenges that actually slow that 17-year process, especially in the research side. If you look at it, it really, we're coming from, and we noticed this about 3 years ago, that everybody's aware in most industries, we've been building up silo information systems over the last 30 years. Jeff mentioned it at the beginning. And how do we actually move to this platform approach? How do we offer an extensible platform, both a business model, and how do we build that going forward so that actually you're not tied into one specific siloed system. You're actually building on open source platforms, and you're building on an open source business model. So we noticed this about 3 years ago, and we changed our business model. I'll talk about that a little bit later. Where we thought a new approach was required, a new approach that allowed you to bring all data sets together, allowed you to have all the analytic tools that you want, access there by a multidisciplinary team across a distributed network geographically, and allow you to actually rapidly build your solutions on top of our platform or our PaaS. Our system, and do this in a pay-as-you-go model. That you're taking a cloud-based approach to this. You're taking a subscription model to this, and really, to say how can I bring multiple data types, be it genomic, imaging, time series, sensor, bring that all together and invite a multitude of different people to do that. And that's the journey we set our business model off around 3 years ago, and it was quite exciting when earlier this year Gartner came up with and gave it a name to what we were doing, and this is a Gartner slide, and I'll acknowledge them on that. And they came and called this an advanced clinical research information system, and they had one of their hype cycles, and they talk about this being how do you bring together a complex constellation of capabilities that allow you to ask the right research and health-related questions. So we're very happy when they started defining our market as an actual defined market, and that we're coming out of the hype cycle. And realistically, that's what we've built. Just a couple more slides before I'll let Jeff maybe ask a couple of questions. We deliver this at the moment at 3 international hubs. We have a hub in the UK that adheres to the UK government's G-Cloud framework. We've just submitted into G-Cloud 8 for those familiar with that, and we have a number of services on there. We also deliver this out of our stratified medicine hub here in Scotland, which is where all our precision medicine clients come to and bring their data. We have a number of international collaborations working there. And we also have under a different brand, under a brand called Research, with our partner in the Netherlands, a very specialist research infrastructure provider, and they supply our service from a Dutch-based hub. Just to say how we structure ourselves as a team, we are actually based here in Edinburgh, and we're based in the hospital in Glasgow. So we deliver we build our capability here. I'll talk a bit more later on, maybe around how we're structured, but we have a DevOps environment for those interested in that, an enablement team, an innovation team, and a business op team. But I'll probably talk about that later. Jeff, any questions at this point? But that's sort of the market we live in and how we approach that market.
Yeah, absolutely. Great stuff. And, maybe an observation that you could comment on. You mentioned a couple of things that were particularly interesting to me. One was that, of course, collaboration is key to this process. And we see that in other types of data science projects as well. Data science generally is a collaborative discipline, and it seems to be no different in this case. And you talked about collaborating not just within an organization, but across organizations. At the same time, healthcare is a heavily regulated industry, both here in the U.S. and abroad in the U.K. and Europe. I'm wondering, how do you think about approaching those two potentially opposing concepts? Collaborating, sharing data, sharing access with more people versus staying within the confines of the regulations that are really important to patient privacy, for example.
Yeah, and that's the balance we've been achieving, Jeff, in what we do, is that it's controlled collaboration, it's controlled access, and we're very much building out some technology at the moment around adaptive consent. So it's just not about giving people a free-for-all, but it's about giving them a platform, but actually access to that is in very much a controlled and managed and a monitored way to come in. So we are bringing together two distinct disciplines. I need to collaborate more, but actually I need it in a more controlled environment. And they sound opposite ends of the spectrum, but actually certainly here in the UK, we've got a great reputation of building process and documentation around data governance. We're quite well leading in that. So we take all that input and we build that into our technology. So it's designed in from the beginning, and people have to feel comfortable. People have to feel comfortable that when they come and bring data to your platform, that actually they will be the only people who can see that data, that they will be the only people who can use that data, that it isn't shared out amongst other people. And we work very hard at every stage of what we do to design that in, to make people very comfortable that actually this is your data, you are the controller of this data, and here are all the mechanisms that allow you to control that and control access to that data. We are facilitating that. But if you want to control, and whoever you wish to bring in, and you bring them in the correct manner, we're allowing that collaboration as well. So it's this ability to do this controlled access, which that goes down to all our choices, where we place our data centers, inside the hospital, inside respected research organisations like VANCES, inside the government secure data centre for the UK. So we're very, very clear in all our choices, Jeff, about how we do that.
Fantastic. And one other quick question. You mentioned also the importance of being able to iterate and continue to develop your models, because the first model is most likely not going to be the one that's going to ultimately lead to success. Could you talk a little bit about that process? Is that new, or is that an emerging approach to clinical research? We hear in the larger industries that we cover here at Pivotal, and we work with at Pivotal, this idea of going from more traditional analytics to this more iterative approach is something that's taken hold over time. I wonder if that's similar in your industry.
Yeah, exactly. It's taking time, and we're trying to move. So a lot of the research is done by mathematicians, and they're not necessarily application developers. The technology coming in now that is allowing them to surface their great research so that more people can have input into that. So there's some specific technology we use, our Shiny technology that's built into our service, that is allowing them to show their results and bring in and engage people into their research in a different way, in a more visual way, in a more way that allows them to comment on what they're doing. So you're not looking at raw mathematical code. So, and certainly the ability to offer different computer modalities, so that if they want to move from different models through to machine learning models, they can do that, and that they don't get wedded. Very key. Some researchers get wedded to one particular tool or one particular way of working. But when you work across a collaboration, people are generally going to bring more ideas, and the power is in how do you share those ideas. But that's going to be hampered if you can't actually produce something. So having the technology that allows them to share and produce quickly just enhances the whole collaborative thing. So people are open to it, and now they've got the platform and the technologies to be able to do that.
Okay, fantastic.
Should be maybe worth if I spend some time just talking about some of our clients who have had permission to talk about, and let people know how they're using and how they're approaching this new world. I brought up a slide there on the European Alzheimer's project called EPAD. This is, I don't know if anybody's aware, but on average, it's about £800 billion is spent per annum on Alzheimer's. It's the surveys will say it's the most feared condition that people get in the world. Once they're told that, they really do think their life is over. and so there's a lot of money, a lot of research. There's been lots of research locally, a regional and a national level. And what this program doing, it's trying to bring 36 different organizations together across Europe. So what EPAD are using our platform together is being able to bring all that data together from all those multiple studies, from all that look at that, in a shared controlled environment, and build on top of that a cohort selection tool that they can then select patients, and then each of the individual clinical trials will then take their set of patients away and go and do their adaptive clinical trial on it. So this is very new, this emerging idea of a pre-competitive consortia we're seeing being picked up in a number of places. Another interesting use case to orientate people to the type of service you can do, this is one called Chart Adapt. This is to deal with the data challenge is fast data. This is traumatic brain injury patients lying in an ICU who by nature can't speak. The only way you can treat those patients is on the data that's coming off them. So there are a number of sensors on their body. There's 72 million data points per patient stay coming through. And the algorithms that the people were using at the time to run were taking over 48 hours to run. And these are algorithms to predict intracranial pressure so you could monitor the system. And of course, if your average stay in an ICU is 48 hours, that's probably not good enough. So by using our platform, by bringing the data in, de-identifying the data, running on different compute modalities, in this instance it happens to be Spark, the team have been able to reduce that by working collaboratively together with Philips and the University of Glasgow, been able to reduce that down to sub-minutes at the moment, and then deliver that result back into the clinician's hands. So that would be an example. A third sort of project type example would be the work that the Future MS team are doing funded through the Anne Rowling Clinic, and this deals with taking in many different data types. So if you're diagnosed, unfortunately, with MS, there's one type of MS called relapsing onset multiple sclerosis, and what you really want to know is how is my disease going to progress within the next 12 months. And being able to predict that allows you to take a different treatment regime. It allows you to plan in your life a lot better. But to do that, we're taking in different data. We're taking in lab data, imaging data, sequencing data, ECRS data. We're bringing all that data in, allowing the teams to build a diagnostic that they'll be able to run. So if you are, unfortunately, are diagnosed with MS, you'll be able to maybe put on a different a regime for that. So they would be sort of three sort of project-based examples. You can then look at this, people who use the platform and say, actually, I don't want to just use it for one project, I want to use it for my whole ecosystem of projects. So our colleagues and friends at Stratified Medicine Scotland are really leading, I think, globally on this, where they've managed to say, well, if I bring the whole ecosystem of Scotland together, all the research universities, all the healthcare boards, and we offer up a service to life science or pharmaceutical companies to come to Scotland and deliver their research out of Scotland, because we are going to take care from a commercial aspect of how they contract with the myriad of organizations they would normally contract with, and we will allow you to give controlled access to data that we have in Scotland. That would be very attractive to the life sciences company, saying Scotland is open for business. So very much our platform and our service underpins that, allowing them to offer up the controlled access, allowing Scotland to actually say, hey, come to Scotland, we've got these all this capability, we've brought the whole of the health board together, we've brought the whole of the research community, and we're working as a collaborative on behalf of Scotland. So that's an ecosystem approach who would use the service. A final one that uses the service would be somebody like Radboud University Medical System in the Netherlands. They came to us and said, we want to compete on research, not on infrastructure. Why are we spending money on infrastructure when we should be spending money on more researchers? And we need to build out, we need to have and actually said to us, we need a cloud-based platform that will allow us not to worry about the infrastructure, but actually offer up many of the data management tasks that researchers don't like doing. If we can take that off their hands, and this is their slide, they say we need three core systems in our research environment. We need a digital learning system, we need your traditional electronic medical record, which is your ongoing care record, but we also need this idea of a digital research environment where we can bring our own researchers together, we can bring international collaborations together and actually collaborate on the research, not actually on the infrastructure and worry about building the infrastructure. So that would be ecosystem approach, Jeff. So that would be sort of 5 examples of people who in the real world have approached this, embracing this platform approach. If I break there, if you've got any questions on that?
Sure. Yeah, so one of them that really caught my attention, or at least one of the data points, you mentioned with patients dealing with brain damage and the 72 million data points that are kind of flowing off all the sensors that are, associated with that patient. Could you talk a little bit about that phenomena, known as IoT, and how that is impacting your industry? We see it across industries, but certainly in the clinical research and medical fields, there's new sources of data that are associated with these sensors. I imagine giving you a new rich source of data to integrate with your platform.
Yeah, so you hit the nail on the head. It's giving us a new sort of data, but it's a very important source of data, Jeff. It's direct from the patient. So usually if you consider when you go to see your doctor or you go into a hospital or whatever, you will be seen sporadically, maybe every 6 months, or even if you're in treatment, maybe every 6 weeks, maybe every even week. But if I've got a sensor on you, whether it be a diabetic sensor, there's some great ones out on the market now. Abbott Diabetes, for example, have a really good one that constantly takes glucose data off you, whether it be from ICU data, whether it be a heart monitor that you're wearing. It just gives you a complete new data set. But that data set on its own, it will allow you to make some decisions, but actually it's when you bring that data set together with other one. When you can bring that, that real-time data feed in with your broader clinical record, in with maybe your genome, in with maybe some imaging data that you've had, that's where it becomes really exciting, because not only you're creating broader data sets, real-time data sets, but you're also creating new data sources that you can drive analytics through. So it's a hugely exciting development for us, and people are comfortable with sensors. They're comfortable with their mobile phone. They're comfortable using it for lifestyle devices, your Fitbit, etc., etc. So actually, the adoption and the speed up, I think it's nearly a supply issue at the moment. If we can get more sensors, and they have to be more regulated, of course. When you come into our market, they have to go through clinical trials, so it takes a longer time to get those out. But as that comes through, as those sensors come through, I think there's going to be a whole explosion of different and new types of analytics you do. Time series data will come in even more, and just mixing those together, there's a really exciting world that the researchers and the healthcare world is looking forward to. We will be a little bit behind because we do have strict rules on what a sensor is and how you use a sensor and how you feed the data back, and is it a clinical device or not. But they're being addressed, and I think we'll go through there. So yeah, we're quite excited about that, Jeff.
Great. We also have a question from the audience asking about a concept that we talked about a little bit earlier in the conversation. Wondering if you could expand a little bit on the concept of adaptive consent. Could you explain a little bit more detail what that really means?
Yeah. So what's happened for many years is you've wanted to do a trial. You've said what data you potentially have asked the patient. You've gone to your ethics committee and you've said yes, and you've got approval to do that. But actually, you want to keep the patient ongoing and get feedback to them. So you need to know really an individual, how they're doing. The way clinical trials are going, you don't want to set up a clinical trial that quite quickly, well, it's not going to work. Well, then why go through the whole process of the clinical trial? You want to have an adaptive clinical trial based on the data. Well, if you do that, you want to quickly be able to go back to the patient and say, will you allow us to continue with this trial? So it's all about inclusion. It's all about saying, well, the patient needs to have a role and a big say in what they do and what you use their data for. So to have this safe ability to say, actually, what I'm going to do, I'm going to ask you, the patient, can I use your data for this type of trial and for maybe this use and this use and this use? And they say yes, yes, no. And then if you go back and want to use it for something else, you can adapt that consent model, because we've got to move at the times, and if we have the process, we need it as fast but as safe as possible. So that's quite exciting for us. And we've been doing some work with the joint dementia people on this, because you get other challenges in the dementia world as well, where at a point that the patient is unable to give their consent at some point. So it's a very exciting area. It's a very new world, and we're actually working on technology. I'll talk about it later on to look at that adaptive consent.
Great.
So maybe what I think that maybe some people may be interested. I'll just talk very briefly on this shift that we did, maybe from the business transformation aspect, and then I'll maybe talk about some of the services and the technologies and things. It's when we went on this journey for, we're 8-9 years old now, and we used to build very siloed systems for broadly from the healthcare perspective. We built diabetes systems. We built a number of other systems. We have some live running systems in Scotland that GPs use. And we could see 3 years ago that actually we needed to embrace a platform approach if we were going to really help change this paradigm of this 17 to 19 year framework of moving research into clinical practice. So we decided to embrace a new business model, a cloud-based business model, and there's a couple of things. There's lots of companies wanting to embrace that at the moment, but they're encumbered by this left-hand graph, which I certainly recognise is that you're earning your revenues on a legacy license model where you're in a traditional maintenance model with a client, and your client's asking you, well, I want to go to a subscription model. I want to go to a model where I pay as I go for as much as I use. I want to match my consumption. And everybody wants to go there. We go there in our personal life with our phones and our TVs, etc., etc. But actually, if you've got a lot of legacy revenue, how quickly do you stop and kill off that legacy revenue? You want to go through this valley in the middle of, actually, I want to close my legacy revenue off, and especially if you're paying your sales teams on a legacy payment plan for capital purchases. So this is a very interesting transition that lots of companies, lots of big software companies are trying to make, and we've gone through that transmission. You just have to bite the bullet and go through it. You have to say, actually, the left-hand side doesn't serve research well. It might serve my bottom line well, but actually, I really need to embrace this subscription model where people can put their dollar to as they use it, as they consume it, and lots of business people will be aware of that. And you just got to bite it and get through that model. And when you go to a platform business, the other transformation we have to make inside our company is move to an enablement model. How can I just look at enabling my partners, my own people, my clients to actually use the services that we offer? And this is different than say, actually, you need my services to help use my platform. There's lots of people out there proclaim to build a platform model, but then you need their services to use the platform. And of course, when you're trying to shift from an old legacy model where you've got lots of implementation people, the cloud, it's there, it's ready to go. You've got implementation services people, and again, people are trying to hold that. So we have to go through this shift where actually I've got to move everybody to being an enablement model where the platform becomes self-service for clients to use because that's what they want. And then if you move to that, the third leg of our business transformation, and people who are listening from the development space will idea this embracement of a DevOps model, move from a traditional lumpy big release cycle that lots of people would have done in an old model to a continuous release model. And we're constantly on that journey. We're by no means there completely, but we're on that journey, and we're constantly driving our development and operations teams to work closer. We're constantly moving to a faster release cycle. We don't need 5,000 releases a day like some people, but we certainly need more than one a year, which would have been our traditional model, and we currently build towards that. So that would be sort of the business transformation side of things, Jeff.
Yeah, I would say that certainly are some. That story is one I could relate to with a lot of our customers who are dealing with that transformation from traditional approaches to IT and development to this more DevOps and agile application development methodology, and then certainly also applying that to the way they approach analytics, which we talked about earlier. Similarly here at Pivotal, we're doing some of the same things, transitioning from that kind of perpetual license model to a subscription license model, and adopting DevOps internally and agile development to support our product development. So certainly something that we can relate to here as well. We do have a question that's rather technical. but I still would like to ask, it's about bringing multiple data sources together. The question is, what linking fields are used when you're bringing together multiple data sources? Is it by NHS numbers? So basically asking how are different data sets linked together accurately by individual patient?
So again, that depends. Don't forget, we're not just bringing sources through usually one or our clients, but we do help some of our clients with some. We're not just using one health system. It can be maybe 10 health systems. We've got a great piece of work we're doing with the advocate people run out of Leeds, which is looking across, I think it's 4 or 5 different health systems across Europe. And so, I mean, that's one of the early parts of the piece of work that you have to do. Sometimes the first piece of work is how are we going to link this data? And before we link that data, how are we going to de-identify it so that it can be linked in a de-identified point away? And I'll talk a little bit more about that on a couple of other slides. In health systems that actually have a unique identifier, of course, that's a lot easier. In Scotland, we have something called the CHI number. But in a lot of health systems, that isn't. And one of the key, probably the other key challenge before that is the quality of the data, and then you're looking at how am I going to link that data. So, we have special bits of software that can apply identifiers, and there's different rules, but that's part of what the data scientist does when they start analyzing and looking at the data. But it's different in different projects depending on what you do in the data sets and the data types you have to look at. So it's hard to give a specific answer unless someone give me, what they, but then we'd be looking at their sets of data with them or maybe giving them some ideas. But our de-identification service on our data allows and can issue those unique identifiers if that's need be. And then if you needed to re-identify the person back in your own environment, you could do that as well. And it holds consistency across those linked fields across data sets as well. So, I mean, if anybody's got other questions on this, just contact me at chris.roach@aridhia.com and I'll happily pick those up offline, Jeff.
Okay, great, fantastic.
I mean, that might be a good segue to talk a little bit about the technology, and before I jump into just sort of some of the services that we offer and some of the other things that we do. I mean, one of the reasons at this point, and you brought it up, is why we're so keen on Pivotal and why we're so keen on EMC and that family of tech, is that we very much have an aligned business model about building out a platform. Both from a licensing to the way you build your technology that allows you to scale horizontally, and that you don't take that step into my area next minute I see you competing against me. So the services you offer me allow me not to worry about certain things so that I can then offer. So our technology choices is around people who also embrace a platform approach. And I suppose I've put up here for people to look at that as a marketecture slide, I would say, or a service orientated slide, which is on the left side of this thing's. Our technology and the way we look at the world is agnostic to your data type. Whatever your data type or the channel you wish to bring that in, we have a number of services to bring data into our platform, and we're constantly growing out that, whether it's coming straight off a sequencing machine or through a very secure messaging FHIR, or people in healthcare, HL7 is a messaging route, or it's a straight FSTP route in. We're agnostic to the data source. We're also agnostic to the data destination, so we can have very tightly coupled schema that some people are very interested in having, or we can have very open schema that allow people to actually use it more as a data lake principle, which again is why we like the EMC Pivotal technology, because they were one of the first companies that brought together sort of the underlying technology of Hadoop and structured SQL data, and we wanted all those to work nicely and play together. So when we made our first technical decisions back 3 years ago, that's one of the reasons. So you've got this agnostic source and you've got this agnostic destination, which you can template the destination you want your data in, and we bring our data in through, I'll talk about it in a moment, a healthcare landing zone, which we have a number of services there that allow people to transform the data, varying from our de-identification services. This is where our adaptive consent service will work, our data set library, our ontology services, our data quality, and this acts as a sort of a data staging area that actually sits and from a secure reason also with our ecosystem clients actually is connected into their actual infrastructure and into their services. And we have a number of these, and then the data comes through this healthcare landing zone into your workspace, which will have inside that all the audit, all the analytic tools you need. We have a lot of open source analytic tools, the compute and data fabric that you need, all served up to you. And if you need to bring your own tools to that, we have the ability to do that as well. And that workspace you have can be templated with some of your own tools. It can be templated with healthcare analytics schemas. It can work and with you from completely open to actually, this is what I want and this is what I want to up to my analyst. Separate to that, we have a separate precision medicine module, which we're building out with Stratify Medicine Scotland, that will allow us to do very specific things with federated analyses and very specific things with some very specific biomedical pipelines that we will plug into that play. A certain another view on that, Jeff, would be, this is the same view of the same picture, which is on the left-hand side, agnostic to the source. They come through your healthcare landing zone, which have a number of standard services in there, and that we expend those services depending on which client we're working with. Some clients want a very specific service built for their environment, and with our ecosystem clients, that's what we do. We're doing that especially with the Radboud University and with Stratify Medicine Scotland. And then lands into your workspace, which is the main concept, where enables workspaces can be templated for a small clinical trial, for precision medicine workspace, or whatever that happens to be. And then we're also working on some facility to bring the data back out in a controlled fashion through what we call airlock, and back in to maybe surface that data back up in your EHR clinical record, or maybe in a device by the bedside. So that's sort of the 50,000 foot view on some of the technology. And what we're trying to do in there, if you look on the left hand side of this diagram, we've identified all these research tasks that researchers do, and we're trying to say, well, let's give them choice. There's some of the tools and some of the things we give them choice, ranging from R, SQL, MATLAB, to do those tools that will underpin that research task, and then specifically trying to drive their time to value. So we're focused on how do we speed up the tasks that they do. So where a sourcing data may have taken months before, because of the way we've worked it, we put data cataloging services in, and various different things that we're bringing into that flow. And so it's a platform approach, constantly building out the capability. So it's a never-ending story for us. We're constantly building it out. Jeff.
Great. Yeah, it seems you would continually need to adapt and evolve the platform as both new types of data become involved, as well as new approaches to analytics are developed, which is an area of a lot of innovation happening right now. You mentioned kind of the data science workspace, and that you allow data scientists and researchers to bring their own tools if the tools you're offering are not necessarily the ones that they're most familiar with or perhaps want to use.
Yeah.
I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about the importance of that in terms of making the workspace for data scientists as productive as possible.
Yeah, so I'll steal some lines. He's on holiday, so he won't mind. My CTO, Rodrigo Barnes, who talks about when we thought of putting what platform do we need to get. You can't force people, and even if there's a research institution saying I want people to use this platform, telling people to do something is never a good approach. So you've got to encourage people, and we knew we had to do two things right. Firstly, make people very comfortable with their data would be safe, secure, and they would be the only people able to work with their data. You have to focus on that one. The second one is we say we have to meet them at their front door. So people who might be desperate to use open source tools, especially in the research community where you need to see your code. Some tools that you use don't actually let you see your code, so then you can't reproduce your experiment. So some of these tools like R, Python allow you to see your code, but they're new to some people. They may have been used to a SAS or an SPSS environment, and to say to someone, I want you to transmit directly into that. So you've got to meet people at the front door. So we give them the option. We say, built into our platform, into our web interface, all audited, and everything you do, we have all these open source tools built in as well. We also can extend that using virtual technologies, and again, we use VMware and the EMC family here to extend those technologies, and we will allow our workspace to be extended where you can either have pre-templated tools in there if you wish them. So most of our research institutes have site-wide license for a number of tools, and they want to reuse that license, and you can bring that tool with their license, and people can use that license if they so wish to use that tool. Because sometimes people want to use the platform not for research, they want to use it for operational analytics, maybe running a hospital, or maybe doing more BI type of things. And there are certainly some really good tools out there. The ClickViews, the SPSSs, the SASs of the world have some really great tools in that. And there's some great visualization tools that people want to use, like Tableau. So, and the secret here is that actually both of those environments are running off the same source data set, and they're both being audited at the same time. So that's quite a complex thing to do, quite a challenging thing to do, and And so, we just believe you've got to give people choice, meet them at their own front door. We've built a collaborative business model. We can't say this is the only way. So, we're always trying to be as collaborative as possible. It allows people to if people have been working, they don't want to throw away all that knowledge they've been using, all that experience they've got. It allows them to reuse that, Jeff, and not just say, well, all that last, 10 years of work I did is thrown away. So we're trying to extend the platform in that and bring people along on the journey, if that makes sense to you, Jeff.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the profile, if you will, of your users. What does a typical user look like? I mean, we talk about data scientists and clinical researchers. What is the typical background of someone in this field when it comes to analytics and quote-unquote data science?
Yeah, so the collaboration will be made up of a number of people, yeah. You'll have maybe some lead principal investigators in the project who would have come up through the research route, but they'll be leading the clinical side. They won't be doing the hands-on data science. They'll be doing the clinical side. There'll be other researchers and other people who different disciplines. It might be somebody who works with genomics data, a bioinformatician. There might be some more clinicians who are more data orientated, and there might be some very specific mathematicians in that. So it's a broad set of skills, and some want to be able to work with the data in real detail. They can code R, they can write those algorithms, and other people just want to be able to engage and look at the outputs of what that. So the collaboration is very broad, yeah, ranging from a deep coding type person to a principal investigator who's focused on the clinical side, and to be able to engage them more in the platform. So we might, if you've got a collaboration, say 100 people, you might have 20% of those working on the data on a daily basis. They might be surfacing them up to another set of people who are interacting, clinicians, maybe even patients. We have some patients on some of the projects. That might be another 40%. And then the rest of the people may only engage briefly, but they come in, look at the output, make comments through the collaboration tools, because that all needs to be tracked and audited so you can see the whole conversation and the workflow, and we track all the comments. So you've got a complete bundle. So it does vary from deep data scientists to actually patients who might want to be involved in looking at what's happening as well.
Right, which just underscores the importance of providing that flexibility of the different types of tools.
Yeah. Maybe I've got a final slide here, and then just on looking forward and the kind of things we're working on and how we're extending the platform over the next 6 months or so. You see the picture there on the middle is the heart of what we do, is our collaboration space, our workspace we call it. And we're building it out in two directions. We're building out what we call a healthcare landing zone, which is the ability to bring data in a consented manner from your ecosystem. So we're building things in there at the moment, more things actually around participation, privacy and consent modules, and they're hooking into our de-identification services. We're putting more publishing stuff in there, more data cataloging services, and I'll make a point here. We don't build this from scratch, a lot of this. We're a mix between some of these capabilities we've built ourselves, but a lot of times we're integrating third-party tools in here into our platform. So we have Castor would be one of the tools we're currently integrating into here. So there's, if somebody's done it already and they're doing a good job, we'll look for an open API to bring that in for people. So we're not about building it ourselves. But we've got some CCAN is potential technology we're using around the data cataloging services, where, in a controlled way, if people want to make their data available to everybody else, they've got a publishing controlled way at an institutional level to make their data level. So we're building out those services as well. We're building out electronic data capture services. This is the Castor one with people. A lot of people, when they first start their clinical trial, they need to be having what we call an ECRF. Those from the research background will understand that on the phone. And this quickly allows you to build up a very quick data capture form for the trial you may be doing. And that will just inject straight into our workspaces. On the precision medicine side, we're doing a lot of work with the Global Alliance for Genomic Health around multi-center APIs to be able to do federated analysis across genomic data sets that are distributed, that the data can't move, or for reasons either through governance or because the data sets are just too big, but you still need to look across those data sets. So we're doing lots of work in there, and then some very specific workflows around some of the biomedical stuff we're doing at Stratified Medicine Scotland. So we're constantly building out the platform in those two directions, as well as put in more collaboration, build out more usability and more user-friendly, whether it be the traditional collaboration tools or putting more analytic tools into the platform. I think Python comes along soon into the platform, is embedded into the platform, and some other little services in there, Jeff. So that would be sort of the vision of where we're going with this piece at the moment.
Great. And maybe could you elaborate a little bit on how you make those decisions about what technology to adopt? Is it based on essentially customer feedback, user feedback, these are the tools we'd like to see you adopt, or are you looking more ahead, trying to get ahead of trends and identifying what you think will be the powerful technologies of the future?
A bit of both. We have some really good early adopter clients who work at an ecosystem level with us who we have, they really much influence our roadmap. They know where they want to go as a research university. They know where they want to go as a precision medicine. They're at the forefront of this. They're groundbreaking in what they do. And we're very much taking the steer from them and collaboratively work together and decide, we obviously have an understanding of this area, but we collaboratively together work to decide what we want to do. Obviously, one of the other things I do, some of the projects on our platform, I actually am engaged in with our clients. We have our own internal enablement and data science team who are engaged with our clients. And just from the using our platform, we find another of the things we'd like to improve ourselves. So we use our own platform because I actually, for a small number of our projects, I will actually engage in depth in their analytic model that they are building. And so we do that with a few of our clients. So we're looking at how it's actually operationally used. We look at with our ecosystem clients who bought the platform for the service across every project they want to do. They really inform our roadmap. And the third, so we're always looking broad use. We're always looking to make a decision. Can we make it more easy and self-service? And the third one is an internal thing, is this DevOps environment. How can we make our platform ever more scalable underneath the covers that the client never sees? And so our technology choices and how we develop the platform is very much focused on those DevOps conversations as well.
Okay, great. Well, Chris, thanks so much. This is a great presentation. We now have a few minutes left for questions. One question we have is about getting the patients involved directly in these clinical research projects. Could you talk a little bit, Chris, about the benefits of getting actual patients involved, and is really what's enabling that? Is it the technology itself, or in the past perhaps it would be too challenging to get patients involved, or is this just a new way of doing it, maybe a little more modern, a little more efficient way of getting patients involved?
Yeah, so there's a technology approach, and most things at technology, the answer is yes. So really part of the technology, is it possible to do these things? The thing is, it's a broader, I think the healthcare system and the research system in general has understood that unless they get the patient involved, they are not going to get, the consent to do their data. And the healthcare system and the research systems are working really hard at the moment to make it very open to what we're doing and say, actually, we need more patients involved because we need more data, because we need bigger cohorts of patients' data. And we need to make people aware, and there's a big push aware of why it's so important for that to happen. And, if we keep it as a black box and don't ask, the patient to be involved, then where are we going to go? And also the patient usually, and certainly on a number of rare diseases, are the experts in what they do. Yeah. So the patient generally, if you've got a rare disease or you've got a very specific that it isn't a broader, you probably know way more than your GP, and certainly sometimes way more than the specialist. Lots of patient groups in that instance have kept their own data registries. There's a big patient registry market out there for different ones. Multiple sclerosis, cystic fibrosis. So bringing those patients along, it's not just their data, their expertise they have in real time about that, they can really help inform the researcher. And that immediate feedback from them, it's just got to be invaluable for the research community. So I think, the medical and the research community really realize and value that actually for a long time our research has been sort of over here on one side and we do that and then we'll tell you the answer. I think everybody realizes now that both from the benefits of having more people involved can only improve what we build and what we do. Technology-wise, a lot of these technology challenges are doable. A lot of it is, can you come and do it? So, for example, everybody, if they were asked, would you donate blood, would say yes. But how many people actually donate blood? when we're out there. So, you know, if you ask people in the street, would you give your data up for research? Everybody says yes. Yeah, well, you know, but, you know, in reality, we've got to move that forward, and we've got to have a really positive flow on why that's an important thing to do. We've got to shorten that cycle of 19 years, and we've got to build diagnostics. And, you know, data is one of the key resources. You know, data is the currency that we need that will drive this. And at the same time, we need that insight from the patients who are living with these diseases on a day-to-day basis, and that insight can't be lost. So, you know, from our view, you know, driving the collaboration out into the patient element is really, really critical for us.
Great. Just a reminder to the audience, if you have any questions, you can input those into the Q&A box on your screen. So, Chris, I wanted to kind of circle back to the really big picture, which is that, you know, that 19 year long process to get an idea, from an idea to all the way through to a practical treatment that's actually touching the patient. Yep. Ultimately, that's what this really boils down to. I mean, could you talk a little bit about how you see that evolving with these new approaches, not just Aridhia, but in general the new technologies and new approaches that are enabling faster development of these treatments, and how much do you think you can actually shave off that 17-year, 19-year number? I mean, what realistically are we looking at?
So, I think actually, if you look at, for split in two parts, there's a part before you move into, say, a clinical trial, and there's a part during the clinical trial. And there's two parts. The bit that will really shave it quickly in the part before you get to your clinical trial is, I talked about these pre-competitive consortia. I mean, the pharmaceutical and the life sciences world really have, I think, very grown up, very mature in their approach to this, and they've acknowledged really early on that actually we don't have all the skills or the money to do some of this stuff on our own. So actually, before we start competing, instead of trying to, get a smaller set of patients, and just try and do something smaller, let's work together to make sure we got the right set of patients. So I think there's a big drive there that will really shorten the cycle, because the life sciences companies have really driving this open business model. You go to any life science company, whether it be Merck or Janssen, whoever, you go to their website and they talk there about the open collaborative business models, and I think they've really embraced that, and I think that's fantastic. And I think our technology under there allows that neutral environment, because then you've got 36 organizations wanting to work together and all need a place to trust where they come together. So that's why I think the technology and that helps that piece. Once they've done their selection of their cohort of patients, then I think it's shifting into the new world of adaptive clinical trials. And I think you'll see more of these adaptive clinical trials coming out as we move forward. There's been a very traditional process adhered to you've used to have to select your process, select what you do your patients. You might have known early on it wasn't going to work, but you have to go all the way to the end of that process. So that can be significantly shortened by doing the adaptive clinical trial. The other areas in the precision medicine world, where there's lots of drugs that one didn't make it through or a trial because it didn't work for, say, 90% of the patients. And there's a lot of work, a lot of our precision medicine clients, I think they call it orphan drugs there. Now, because we can map the genome of the client and bring this new data set, we can look for a new biosignature that actually, potentially in rheumatoid arthritis, one of our clients is doing this at the moment, where they've mapped 8,000 patients at the genome level, and now looking at that biomarker and saying, actually, we can now work out if I put these patients on the drug, methotrexate is the actual drug, 50% of that will work at you, or 50% would have a detrimental effect on your liver. Actually, we can predict that now because we've been able to use that new data source. So now there's a great possibility of not just shortening that 19-year cycle, of taking lots of stuff that's already been produced and actually repurposing it. And I think that's the real early piece through the precision medicine piece, about being able to repurpose these other, and the technology to do that now, and the ability to bring that in and build the algorithms that do that by bringing the precision medicine and the clinical data together, actually allows us to do that. So we can shorten those cycles there. So there's there's a great area of advance, and the technology there is allowing it to happen at the moment, Jeff.
Excellent. Yeah, a lot of reasons to be optimistic. Well, Chris, thanks so much for taking the time today. Yep, great presentation, and thank you for answering all these great questions from the audience. And of course, thanks everyone for tuning in today. Really appreciate it. Want to just remind people, there are a number of resources you can access both on pivotal.io as well as Aridhia's site that you can see here on your screen now. These slides will also be available after the fact. You can download them and access these resources from there. So once again, thanks everyone for joining. I hope you enjoyed the presentation, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Okay, thanks a lot, Jeff.